If Grant Holmes and Reynaldo López are healthy going into the season, the Atlanta Braves really don't need to prioritize starting pitching this offseason.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network. I am your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X, Locked On Braves on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all those places on the socials and on YouTube. You can check us out there as well. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. Leave us a comment down below. Appreciate all the support that you give me there on YouTube. Been doing a fantastic job this off season, leaving those comments, hitting that like button. So thank you so much for doing all those things. And on the audio side, you can help out as well. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Big shout out to all my everydayers out there. And thanks to everybody who have already signed up to be part of our Everydayer Club. You missed that announcement yesterday. We now have an Everydayer Club where you can pay to get a little bit more access to myself and Lindsay if you so choose. Doesn't change anything about what we do here on the podcast, but if you do want a little bit more access and content from me and Lindsay, you can sign up for that over at lockedonbraves.com/supercast.com or lockedonbraves.supercast.com. Link in the description down below. Today's episode, we're going to talk about some of AA's comments from the winter meetings, more in depth about the rotation with the good news on Grant Holmes. Where's the priority level for a starting pitcher this offseason? Do they need to even acquire a starting pitcher this offseason? We'll talk about that and some of other comments Alex Anthopoulos made at the winter meetings that were pretty quiet on Monday, although we did have a former Brave and Michael Soroka sign, but outside of that, not much else happening. But we will talk about the latest news and rumors on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. As I said, not a lot of news happening on the first day of winter meetings, and we weren't really expecting much to happen from the Atlanta Braves anyway, as Alex is typically pretty quiet. However, on Sunday, you did get a media session from Alex Anthopoulos where he had some very interesting comments, I guess you could say, for his GM comments go these days. And I want to read into a couple of these. The first one from Alex Anthopoulos, this is a tweet from David O'Brien of The Athletic, who said that Alex Anthopoulos said the Braves are treating Grant Holmes like any other healthy pitcher now. He's had no setbacks in his non-surgical recovery from partial UCL tear. He talked to Holmes today, that was on Sunday, and Grant told AA that his stuff is better than before the injury after rest and strengthening. So first of all, this is just great, fantastic news. It's best news that you could have hoped for. I know myself and many of you thought when he had the partial UCL tear during the season, you figured he's going to be gone for all of 2026. You're not going to get anything out of him. He decided to try to rest and recover, which I think was the right idea because at that point you're missing all of 2026 anyway. But after that rest and recovery, everything feels great. I'm assuming they've done some sort of, MRI or something to take a look at the UCL to see if it has repaired and it is in good shape. I'm hoping that is the case, but everything seems to feel good. Grant Holmes said it feels even better than it did before. That's all great news. Whatever else we're about to talk about, that's great news for the Braves and for Grant Holmes. And now he is being treated as a healthy pitcher, which kind of led me down this line of thinking is, what if we treated all the Braves pitchers as healthy pitchers going into the season? What if we just for a second ignored all the injury history of the Atlanta Braves starting pitchers, and you just looked at the names and their numbers in the projected rotation? And if you do that, I think you come to the conclusion that the Braves really don't need to add a starting pitcher this offseason. Let's run down the names really quickly. Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider, Grant Holmes, Reynaldo López, Hurston Waldrep, Bryce Elder. That's 7 for you right there. Bryce Elder, you can put in in a category of your own choosing is how much of you actually trust him. But that's 6 to 7, legitimate big league starters right there. And then you continue past that, you have J.R. Ritchie, you have Lucas Braun, you have Didier Fuentes, you have Joey Wentz still on the roster, and you have Jose Suarez. That's 11 to 12 guys there that you could use as starting pitchers this upcoming season, which is what you need to get through a season. Now, you can obviously say that after the 5th, 6th name there, things get a little bit murky, but they do for every team outside of the Dodgers. I mean, that's 11 to 12 starting pitchers that are already on this roster that could make some starts for you this season. 3 of these guys are in the top 45 in xERA among all pitchers who have thrown at least 230 innings over the last 3 years. So you're talking about 3 basically top 45 pitchers over the last 3 seasons. Sell and Schwellenbach are top 22 in xERA over the past 3 seasons. Strider and Sale are 1 and 4 in K per 9 over that same time frame. So you're talking about 2 to 3 of the best pitchers in all of baseball in Sale, Schwellenbach, and Strider. This has the potential to be a great rotation if you did nothing else. That's the positive. Like I said, other than the Dodgers, you're not going to find any team in Major League Baseball right now that has more depth and quality depth than this Atlanta Braves rotation without making another move this offseason. You won't find another team with that much depth and that much quality depth. That's the positive. Here's the rub. Bryce Elder leads that group by a wide margin in innings pitched over that same 3-year time frame that I just gave, with a 380 2/3 innings pitched. Bryce Elder has thrown the most innings for you over the last 3 years. Spencer Strider's next at 321, then Chris Sale at 303.1, and Schwellenbach at 234. Granted, he's only been up for 2 years. But those guys have missed a lot of time. And every single one of those pitchers has a huge question mark going into the next season. Maybe the only one that I feel somewhat confident about is Chris Sale, and he's going into his age 37 season, which brings its own set of question marks, not to mention, he's had trouble staying healthy himself over the last handful of seasons. But he's the only one that from the end of last year that I feel pretty good about going into 2026. Schwellenbach, we didn't get to see him at the end of the year. Had he come back and made 2 or 3 starts, looked like himself, I'd put him in there, that category of sell that I feel pretty good about Schwellenbach. But right now, I just don't know. Spencer Strider, who is he? We don't know. The guy that we saw, at the parts of 2025 is not the guy we were hoping for. So who is Spencer Strider? And if he's not a top of the rotation guy, can he at least figure it out to just be a solid, number 2, 3 starter, which I think is possible. But again, we just don't know. Grant Holmes, great news. Great to hear that the stuff feels better, looks better, is better. Great to hear that UCL apparently has healed up. But what happens when you start building back up that workload? Is that UCL, going to eventually just break on him? Bryce Elder, again, you saw the good and you saw the bad with Bryce Elder last year. Can he just kind of put it together and just be a mediocre pitcher? Can he just be a solid 4 or 5 starter and not have these months where he's just completely unusable? J.R. Ritchie, Lucas Braun, we don't know. Didier Fuentes didn't look good in his debut, although I still love the stuff. Joey Wentz, Jose Suarez, those are just spot starter type of guys. So there are huge question marks with all of these guys in the rotation. Like I said, outside of maybe Chris Sale, and he comes with his own question marks just because of his age and his durability over the last 4 or 5 seasons. So I understand the reasoning. And look, I'm still very much on the side of they need to go out and find a starting pitcher. I think the one thing that we can argue about and debate is, do they need to find a top of the rotation starting pitcher this offseason, which I've never really been on board with. But the more you think about it, I can see, again, the other side of the argument is why spend $15 million to go get, a Kyle Freeland or a Mitch Keller or whatever the case may be, ex starting pitcher, mid back of the rotation starting pitcher, when you have Reynaldo López, Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder, Hurston, Waldrep, guys that you already have paying less money to that could be just as good, if not better. So I think what this ultimately does for me, and if you've been following along this offseason and you're part of our everydayers here, you already know that my focus this offseason has really started to shift more towards a bat or two. I think the bigger need is on the lineup side of things. And as I, contemplate this through more and more throughout the off season, because you are capable of thinking things more through and changing your mind if you so choose, I look at that starting rotation, and if I'm considering López healthy and Grant Holmes healthy and in the rotation, which it sounds like they are, Schwellenbach's ready to go, Strider's healthy, ready to go, Sale is ready to go, you have Elder and you have Waldrep waiting in the wings, you have 2 or 3 prospects that could be ready to debut in the first couple of months of the season. Starting pitcher is not a top priority for me. It's a priority. It's not a top priority for me. So this is how I rank the priorities now at this point in the offseason. Number one for me is finding a dominant setup guy. There's another comment from AA that we're going to get to in the next segment that really pushed this to the top for me. I think the number one priority is a dominant setup guy. 2 for me is finding depth in the lineup. DH, bench spot, shortstop. I still think that is a higher priority for me. And then 3 is finding depth in the rotation. It's always been about just finding that innings eater, veteran type of guy, mid rotation, 3-4 type of starter. It doesn't have to be top of the rotation for me, but I can understand the argument of why go get another depth starter when you have a ton of depth starters. Go get a top of the rotation guy. But for me, it doesn't have to necessarily be that. Give me the Zach Eflins of the world. Give me somebody that can just provide some depth and give you some quality innings. So that's my priorities right now in the offseason with what's already happened and what we know at this point. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. All right, next we'll get into some other comments from Alex Anthopoulos, including one on Joe Jiménez. We'll talk about all that here next. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly. You can check out FanDuel.com right now. They have World Series odds already out there for next season. The Braves at plus 1,900. It'd be interesting to see how these shift after the next couple of weeks when we expect to see some big signings and trades happen. You can also look over at NHL, NBA, college football. You got the playoffs coming up soon. The national championship title odds favorite right now are actually Ohio State over Indiana. And I'm pretty sure Indiana just beat Ohio State. Georgia with the third best odds there. You can see all that over at FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you as always. Make it Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Solely getting caught up on everything happening at the winter meetings and keeping you up to date with all the movings and happenings all season long. So make sure you go check them out. Make sure you subscribe here as well to Locked On Braves. We'll have more content coming your way this week as hopefully the Braves do something at the winter meetings. But either way, I'll have you right here at Locked On Braves. So make sure you subscribe there. Make sure that you join our Everydayer Club. As I said, you have 2 tiers. You have our $5 tier, which gets you access to ad-free audio feed. You get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Discord server, exclusive access to national bonus shows, a member-only Locked On merch store. All of that you can get with just our $5 tier, but also you have our all access where you get all of that I just mentioned. You also get access to bonus episodes that me and Lindsay will be doing, one-on-one text with me and Lindsay, a daily newsletter that me and Lindsay will send out, and a 15% discount on all orders from the member-only Locked On merch store. Go check that out at lockedonbraves.supercast.com. Thanks so much for those who have already signed up to support us there and get that additional content. Jumping back into our topic for today, though, I want to get into some more comments from Alex Anthopoulos at the winter meetings. This also coming from a tweet from David O'Brien of The Athletic. AA said they can't say the same about Joe Jiménez yet and his health. And Jiménez had his surgically repaired knee scoped recently, had a cleanup, but they aren't counting on him until he ramps up throwing and shows he is healthy. This has become very, very worrisome for me. Very, very worrisome for me with Joe Jiménez, because you are counting on a guy who hasn't pitched in over a year to be one of your big setup guys. You're paying him like that too. I mean, you're paying him good money, and he's still, after a year and a half, I guess it's not quite to that point yet, but you're talking about once you get to spring training, you're talking about over a year, and you don't know what to expect from a guy who hasn't pitched in over a year and who's had setbacks with the knee. That's worrisome to me. Right now, you're looking at a bullpen of Iglesias, Lee, Bummer, Payamps. Assuming Jiménez isn't ready and that they don't move Holmes or López to the pen, and even if you moved one of those guys to the bullpen, which I think you probably should do to at least start the year, that's still a pretty subpar looking bullpen. And some of this could depend on if they go to a 6-man rotation or not. But again, either way, you need another 7th or 8th inning guy. I don't know how much you can go into the season counting on Jiménez. Just like what we talked about with the starting pitchers. At least for right now, Holmes is saying he's healthy and ready to go. López is saying he's healthy and ready to go. Schwellenbach, Strider, Sale. All 5 of those guys right now, you at least deem to be healthy and ready to go for spring training. All could change once we got there. But with the information we have right now, you can't say that about Joe Jiménez. And that really, really worries me for a bullpen that already felt kind of fringe. And that's why getting a relief pitcher has really shot up for me in the priority list. Because one, it already didn't look like a great bullpen to begin with. And now one of the guys that you were hoping was going to be healthy and be a big part of that bullpen, you don't know where they are health-wise and if they're even going to be ready to begin the season. Now, he's a relief pitcher. He can get in spring training. He can ramp up quickly. I get that. But I'm just saying, with the information we have today, I'm not considering Joe Jiménez for the bullpen, which means I need to go find another setup man. So that's priority number 1 for me right now this offseason. Another comment from Alex Anthopoulos, who said, the Braves' preference at this point is to leave the DH open and split the duties rather than acquire a full-time DH like Ozuna. This is probably the best news that I got out of these comments from Alex Anthopoulos. While hearing about Grant was fantastic as well, you know, I have been pushing, even when Ozuna was good, I have been pushing to eventually have a more fluid DH spot, to be able to utilize all the players on your roster, to have more dynamic lineups, and to be able to give guys days off. I have been pushing for that for a while. And look, Ozuna was great. I would certainly take 23 and 24 Ozuna in the DH spot every day. Don't get me wrong. But I do think it is a huge benefit to the team going forward, especially with the injuries they've dealt with, especially with Ronald Acuna Jr., to be able to have a day where you can put him in the DH spot and not have to completely rest him and lose his bat, and where you can get Profar out of the outfield and put him in the DH spot, maybe to upgrade your defense. You can mix and match your lineup a little bit more, and that's just some flexibility that, one, we haven't had for a while, and two, I don't know that we've had a manager that was really all up for that. And, I mean, to his defense, he hasn't had the bench to be able to really do any of that, because the bench has pretty much been a waste for this Braves team for a while now. So this is good news to hear from me, as long as he goes out, talking about Alex Anthopoulos now, Alex goes out and builds that depth on the bench so that you can rotate guys out of that DH spot. You can play a hot hand in that DH spot, and you can have more dynamic lineup, situational lineups. That's what I think has been missing a lot from this team over the past several years. However, AA has lied to us in the past. Don't be shocked if it's January 24th, Ozuna still hasn't signed, and you get a blue screen about how the Braves have brought him back on a 1-year, $10 million deal, which I don't hate. don't get me wrong. I wouldn't necessarily hate it as long as it comes with the idea that if things aren't working out, we're not going to continue to just force them in that DH spot. And even if they are working out, we're going to give him days off in that DH spot to be able to rotate some guys in there and get them at bats. Again, I would prefer not to and just have a DH spot that you can rotate, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if, Ozuna came back on a 1-year, $10 million deal, something like that. Now, giving up that 26th draft pick is something else that Alex Anthopoulos talked about for, signing somebody with a qualifying offer. Would he be willing to sign a Ranger Suarez, Bo Bichette, Kyle Tucker, one of those guys that has a qualifying offer attached to them, and give up that 26th overall pick? And Alex said, we've had discussions and explored players that would mean losing that pick if we sign them. We're not opposed to it, but again, it's all part of it. You're weighing it. It's about alternatives, trades, all that kind of stuff. Right player, right deal. We're open to it. And like me, I don't think it's going to happen unless you're signing Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Ranger Suarez, like I just mentioned. I don't see it happening, and I don't really see it all worth it. Look, you can sign one of those guys; they're better than the prospects you're going to draft. Although for me, it's not so much about the player you're going to draft at 26 as it is the player you're going to draft in the top 10. We'll find that out on Tuesday night, where the Braves are going to be picking. Hopefully, it's higher than the top 10. But for me, that pick is not so much about who you draft at 26. It's about that bonus pool money for who you can try to pick earlier in the draft. We talked about that on Friday's mailbag episode. You want to go give that a listen. But, that 26th overall pick, that's going to be worth $3.5 million in bonus pool money. That is a big deal. Now, again, a lot's going to depend on where the Braves fall in the draft lottery. But either way, let's just say, for an example, and again, this is what I talked about on mailbag episodes, so you're going to get it again here. But let's say the Orioles are picking at 3 and the Braves are picking at 4. And let's say the Orioles are thinking about taking Justin LeBron, but they can only offer him $6.7 million. But the Braves, because of this extra bonus pool money, they can offer him $7.2 million. LeBron can sit there and tell the Orioles, I'm not going to sign with you for anything less than $7 million, or else I'll just go back to Alabama. Orioles could call him on that bluff, still draft him, and then work out a deal. Certainly could. But that's a risk to them that they might miss out on signing, on wasting a third round or a number 3 overall draft pick. That's a risk to the Orioles that they might not come to an agreement with that guy. And so they could pass on him and go to the Braves. And, the Braves would obviously draft him and paid him that agreed upon amount. That's how you can essentially buy down players in the draft. And you do that by having extra picks and having more money to spend in the draft pool. So look, if you're going to sign a Kyle Tucker, a Bo Bichette, or Ranger Suarez, I don't think anybody's going to be too upset about it. But I don't think those things are going to happen. And 2, I think they're just going to hang on to that pick and really just load up in this upcoming draft. So hoping for good results on Tuesday. All right, those were the big comments from Alex Anthopoulos on Sunday. Next, we'll get into some of the news from the winter meetings and Michael Soroka finding a new team. We'll get into all of that here next. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app comes in clutch for you, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts with great seats open up, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. I use Game Time whenever I'm getting ready to go to a baseball game. Used them to go to the Braves game last year. Got a great deal last minute on Game Time, but you can use them to go to concerts, events, all of that as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time for every match, concert, or event. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Just swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. All right, finishing things off here on today's episode is I'm getting ready to go record some bonus content with Lindsay. So look for that for all our everydayer club members out there. it's awfully quiet right now at the winter meetings. Again, we expected that from the Braves, but I do think some things will be coming along soon, hopefully, to ramp things up here at these winter meetings. It feels like something always happens late at night. Right now, you're just hearing a bunch of rumors. You're hearing that good teams are interested in good players, which isn't much of news. We did have the Hall of Fame announcement on Sunday night, and unfortunately, Dale Murphy missed out again. He only got 6 of the 12 votes that were needed. Jeff Kent was the only one to get elected. So hate it for Murph, hate it for Braves fans. Like all of you, I believe he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. One thing, though, that really is making things murky is the fact that these steroid era players, because just on numbers, these players should be in the Hall of Fame, no doubt. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Gary Sheffield, I guess he's more kind of fringe, but those guys should be in the Hall of Fame based on their numbers. And you got some voters that are going to look past all of that and just vote for them, and you got some voters who aren't, and they're just going to completely ignore them. But it's making it tough for other guys like Dale Murphy and like for Fred McGriff for so long, and even to some extent Andrew Jones probably, because that's taking away votes from other guys. Whereas, there've been no steroid issues. Barry Bonds goes in, first ballot Hall of Famer, Roger Clemens too. Those guys are off the ballot, and Dale Murphy's not having to compete with some of those guys on ballots like this, because you just look at the names. And I said this when the ballot came out, you look at some of those names and you just compare the numbers. I mean, Dale Murphy's down the list compared to some of those guys, but it's just not fair. And it's why I've kind of given up on caring all that much about the Hall of Fame, because the steroid era players and there not being any clear direction from the hall itself is really just made everything very convoluted when it comes to the Hall of Fame. So until we can get past these steroid era players, it's just going to be really tough to gauge these Hall of Fame votes. Soroka, as I mentioned, he did sign a 1-year, $7.5 million deal with the Diamondbacks. Could get up to $9.5 million. I was surprised to see that he got that much. But good for him. Good for Soroka. Always be cheering for him. There has been a lot of mention of Kyle Schwarber and how everybody loves him. Even the Pirates, it was reported, offered him a 4-year deal. Did not see for how much. I don't know if that was announced or not. It might have been $25. Who knows? But everybody seems to love Kyle Schwarber, and that seems to be the one right now that is holding everything up. And seeing where Kyle Schwarber goes, I'd still be shocked if the Phillies don't get him back. But at the very least, hopefully teams are driving up that price. The Padres are listening on Nick Pivetta and Jake Cronenworth. So that's very interesting. I was in on Nick Pivetta last year for the Braves before he ended up signing with the Padres late. So maybe that's another option there for the Braves in a trade. And then tomorrow is going to be a huge day for the Braves. You're going to have the draft lottery happening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on MLB Network. We're going to see where the Braves are going to land. Do they get that top pick? A little bit over a 4% chance of that happening, but at the very least, can they get one of those top 6 spots? Use that extra bonus pool money from the 26th overall pick and find that future shortstop, outfield, whatever the case may be. I'm going with a big bat wherever they're picking, and hopefully the top 6 or top 10, but that'll be revealed on Tuesday. So that'll be big news for the Atlanta Braves. We'll be back here to cover that on Locked On Braves. But that will do it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me. Mark Delgado, CH Man, Jeffrey Humphrey, Soul Still Burns, Mass Booze, Protect PR, some of our everydayers in here. Thank you so much for joining me again. You want to be part of our everydayer club, go to lockedonbraves.supercast.com, where you can see our eligible subscriptions there. But thanks so much for your support here on the podcast. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave us a comment down below. Video Moon are getting us in here. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will talk to you next time.